Do you want to live longer, live with less disease, and have a better sense of self-worth? These are just a few of the benefits that are said to be the result of fasting. Yep, all that from simply not eating. Most people are only aware of its effect on fat loss and weight maintenance, which is also a must for a healthy lifestyle. Around the world, obesity has been steadily growing at an increasing rate. The CDC quotes a startling number of 41.9% for obesity prevalence in the USA. As such, everyone's trying different diets to lose weight, including fasting. In this video, we're going to look at exactly what happens to your body during a fast, including its amazing benefits. While weight loss is one, you probably aren't aware of the other one. Continue watching to find out. Before we talk about fasting, we need to define it. In its simplest definition, fasting is the abstention from eating, drinking liquids with calories, and sometimes drinking altogether. This simple definition would imply that we're always fasting so long as we're not eating. This is pretty much all day. This doesn't really describe what fasting is. Therefore, some state that a period of fasting officially begins 3 to 5 hours after your meal, as that's how long it takes for your last meal to be fully digested and absorbed. Still, even with this definition, we fast every day. Well, at least an overnight fast. The first meal of the day is called breakfast or break fast. It's when our body comes out of this daily overnight fast with the first food of the day and breaks the fast. Still, others will say a fast begins when physiological changes begin to occur. From this perspective, a fast could be said to begin 12 hours after your last meal. This is when a metabolic shift takes place in most individuals. We'll talk more about that later on in the video. While the exact time a quote fast begins is up for discussion, we do know that refraining from eating has been around for a long time. Although fasting has hit the fitness community only recently, it's actually been a part of mankind's history since the beginning. When humans fasted originally, it was due to having no choice in the matter. Before humans developed agriculture and cultivated livestock, they practiced a foraging lifestyle and did not get to choose when they would eat their meals. In fact, fasting has been practiced in this manner for much of mankind's history, as agriculture has only been around for 12,000 years. Therefore, it's believed that many of the first post-agricultural communities practiced fasting as their bodies were already adapted to it, and continuous eating could have been seen as strange. For example, the early Romans believed that eating more than one large meal a day led to sickness. In addition, many of the early religions practiced fasting in some manner as a religious practice, often as a way to deny the body's physical needs in order to focus on its higher deity. This went on until the 1800s, when overeating was becoming recognized as an unhealthy lifestyle practice and possibly responsible for many diseases, a view particularly believed by an American physician, Edward Dewey, who believed every disease was caused by overeating. In the 1900s, German physician Otto Buchinger became the first to study and note the health benefits of fasting, saying, "Fasting is, without any doubt, the most effective biological method of treatment." In the 2000s, the Italian biogerontologist and fasting researcher Walter Longo noted that fasting has numerous significant benefits that lead to both an extended lifespan and an extended health span. Even with these proponents and a growing base of supporting research that testifies to the health benefits of fasting, it can still be looked at with uncertainty by the public. This is primarily because many people simply don't understand what actually happens during fasting, except you get hungry. Still, even what is largely misunderstood as hunger is not reported nearly as much as you might think. This lack of hunger is just one of the things we'll look into in this video as we look at what's going on physiologically during a 3-day fast. Let's get into what happens when you put the fork and knife down. After you eat your meal, your food is broken down, including your carbohydrates, which initially causes a spike in your blood glucose levels. Initially, these blood glucose levels are what's used to supply energy and maintain function. However, as time progresses longer and longer after you eat, your blood glucose levels will begin to drop. In order to maintain functional blood glucose levels, glycogen, which is basically a stored version of glucose, will begin to break down. This is done through a process known as glycogenolysis in order to supply extra glucose during times of fasting. As you go farther, your glycogen levels will begin to drop lower and lower. This will force your body to turn to non-carbohydrate sources, namely fats and proteins, to convert to glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. Then your body will turn to ketosis, the production of ketones for energy. We'll look at this process in greater detail below, But rather than rely on glucose, your body will then use these ketones for energy. In addition, this will spare the glucose that's produced to fuel red blood cells and the brain, which require glucose to function. Regardless, this whole process provides a very important benefit: the lowering and stabilization of blood glucose levels and the increase of sensitivity to insulin. With over 10% of the U.S. population suffering from diabetes, fasting could make a massive impact on the country's health. Small studies on patients with diabetes have even shown that fasting can be effective for weight loss in those with type 2 diabetes while decreasing the need for insulin. Now, the same process that results in the stabilization of blood glucose and sensitivity to insulin also has another profound effect. In fact, from a fitness and performance perspective, this may be the most profound effect of fasting: a metabolic shift in the production of energy. We just went through the basics of this process but only touched on the stabilization of glucose. Now we'll go through it again in detail in terms of its effect on the metabolism of energy. With the rise in keto, many people in the fitness industry are familiar with the concept of becoming fat-adapted, or your body utilizing fatty-free acids for energy. But what does this mean? Well, the term fat-adapted can be a bit of a misnomer, as many may take this to mean your body doesn't usually use fat. It does, but it uses carbohydrates as its preferred source of glucose production under normal eating conditions. As carbohydrates are essentially just strands of sugars, breaking them down is a relatively simple process. They'll be broken down into glucose and sent directly to the bloodstream, or glycogen to be stored for later use. However, as mentioned before, your body can also convert fat or protein into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis, the synthesis of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. As you could guess, this is a much more complicated process, as it must completely transform compounds. Therefore, under normal eating conditions, your body has two sources to produce glucose: carbs in the form of stored glycogen, or fatty acids from stored fat. Under normal conditions, your body will use both of these sources for fuel. What's different is the varying degrees it'll rely on one or the other. Depending on individual factors and activity levels, under normal conditions, your body may get 50 to 70% of its energy requirements from carbs, while getting 30 to 50% of its energy requirements from fat. However, as your fasting time lengthens, your stored glycogen will begin to be converted into glucose more and more. The problem with this is that there is a finite supply of glycogen. Therefore, as the fast continues, your levels of glycogen will drop lower and lower, as you aren't replenishing it with food. As this occurs, your body will start to alter the ratio of where it gets its glucose from. In order to spare glycogen, your body will begin to break down fat to a greater extent. However, as of now, keep in mind that the fat must still be converted into glucose to utilize. This greater reliance on fats for the production of glucose is what occurs during the initial stages of fasting. The length of time for this stage can vary depending on the original baseline glycogen levels as well as your activity levels. As a result, it can last anywhere from 12 to 36 hours. First-time fasters generally take longer to pass through this first stage, while experienced fasters tend to take a shorter time in this phase. Now, as you continue with your fast, the levels of glycogen within the body are heavily depleted. At this time, fatty acids and glycerol are then produced in an accelerated fashion and sent into the bloodstream to head for the liver. It's at the liver where they produce compounds known as ketones. Remember them? These ketones are unique, as they're also able to act as an alternative source of energy. To be clear, they are not converted into glucose first. Rather, these ketones are sent to tissue to be used directly. It's at this moment when you've become fat-adapted. Your body has transitioned from utilizing glucose for energy to ketones for energy. As you could have guessed, this is where the keto diet comes from, except they reach this metabolic shift merely by limiting carb consumption to a minimum. The point is that this metabolic shift is a significant change to the body's physiological system, and it's truly a testament to how magnificent the human body is. Another magnificent adaptation to fasting is a process known as autophagy. Autophagy is your body's waste and renewal system. It's a process by which cells break down so that damaged or dysfunctional components can be removed. These are then replaced with healthy components to maintain a fully functional cell and maintain homeostasis. The process of autophagy can be triggered by a number of different factors, fasting being one of them. During fasting, insulin levels drop, and the body starts to use stored energy such as glycogen and fat for fuel. This shift in energy metabolism may activate autophagy to recycle cellular components and generate the amino acids and fatty acids needed for energy production. Now, where this becomes especially important is with an increase in longevity. Fasting or prolonged calorie restriction has long been associated with an increase in life. As autophagy gets rid of sick cells and replaces them with healthy cells, it makes sense that these individuals with a higher rate of autophagy will have longer lives with less disease as well. In fact, researchers now believe that the autophagy triggered by fasting is primarily responsible for its effect on longevity. Upon fasting, increases in rates of autophagy have been found in just about every organ and tissue, including the heart, liver, kidneys, and muscles. Still, autophagy has been found to work on neurons, which acts as a key mechanism for the prevention of malignancy, infection, and neurodegenerative diseases, as well as in slowing aging. The exact amount of time needed to trigger autophagy is unclear. For example, some studies suggest that merely breaking down your total calories into 2 meals a day is enough. To be clear, if you eat 3,000 calories a day, you would eat 2 meals of 1,500 calories. Other research has shown that simple intermittent fasting is enough to offer positive benefits to cancer patients. So while we don't know the exact time frame and mechanisms, we can be pretty confident telling you that 3 days is more than enough time. So now let's move on to a more obvious adaptation. If you're not eating, you gotta lose weight, right? You do. In fact, apart from religious or political reasons, weight loss, or the maintenance of weight, is one of the more common reasons someone might partake in a regular fast. Researchers have discovered that during the initial phases of a fast, there's a rapid loss of weight. In fact, the weight loss is significantly higher than one would expect just from comparing calories burned versus calories consumed. For example, a case study followed a man who ran a 36-day fast while attempting a 40-day fast for religious purposes. During the fasting period, he only consumed a total of 60 calories a day for communion and only drank water. With a starting weight of 68.6 kilograms, he lost a total of 15.7 kilograms during the fast. However, the drop in weight did not occur evenly. During the first 5 days, he lost an average of 0.9 kilograms a day. This then gradually dropped for the next until it evened out at 0.3 kilograms a day. What's interesting is that 0.9 kilograms would require a caloric deficit of 3,150 calories. However, his basal energy expenditure was only 1,673 calories. These are the calories your body burns to support life functions such as thinking and respiratory function. While the man wasn't bedbound, he didn't even come close to burning 1,500 extra calories. So what happened? Well, it's established that this rapid drop is due to the result of salt and water diuresis. Further, a drop in total muscle glycogen will likely also play a role as well. It's important to keep this in mind as you may drop 3 kilos in 3 days. However, maybe only half of that is actually body weight, while the rest will be gained back by eating. Losing weight is obviously a big plus for many people. Still, there's a more curious adaptation going on behind the scenes. Well, actually, in your head. Fasting has just as much effect on the physical as it does the mental side. One of the more unique aspects of prolonged fasting is an increase in not only satiety, but well-being as well. This sense of euphoria is what has led some to attach fasting to a spiritual aspect. Regardless, it is widely reported, very widely. Reports have estimated that 93.2% of participants in prolonged fasting report an increase in physical and emotional well-being, as well as an absence of hunger feelings. The researchers report that an absence of hunger often shocked the individuals, as fear of hunger is often a deterring factor to fasting. One large study monitored a group of individuals who partook in a fasting protocol for 4 to 21 days. During their individual fasting periods, all the participants saw a gradual increase in emotional well-being and personal well-being until the end of their fast. What's interesting is that those who started with a lower baseline tended to choose to fast for longer periods. Regardless, at the end of their session, all protocols resulted in the same level of increased well-being. This increase in well-being has a variety of mechanisms that are thought to play a role. For example, fasting seems to cause the production of endogenous opioids. In addition, the glucose to keto switch also leads to cognition, mood, motor, and autonomic nervous system function, which increases well-being. It also increases the production of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. BDNF plays many roles and is often associated with neurogenesis and neuronal protection. Further, it's been shown to enhance the growth and survival of serotonin neurons. Speaking of BDNF, it plays yet another role in fasting. Anecdotally, a very common report after prolonged fasting is clearer thinking or sharper thought process results. We now have a better understanding as to why. A fact of life is that as we age, our bodies deteriorate, including our brains. This process can lead one to develop a number of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, or general dementia. Aging of the brain can also lead to a greater chance of experiencing a stroke. Unfortunately, research has now shown that this process can be exacerbated by living a sedentary lifestyle as well as consistently eating a surplus of calories. However, we now also know several ways to combat this deterioration, such as being involved in exercise throughout your life. In addition, challenging the body metabolically has also been found to maintain healthy brain function. One of these mechanisms is through the production of proteins, bringing about metabolic challenges that are involved in synaptic plasticity, neurogenesis, neuronal survival, memory, and learning. Of all of these proteins, the one we just spoke about is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. As we age, this protein sees a steady loss in sedentary persons, which is coupled with a degradation of cognitive performance. Research has shown that its decrease is accompanied by a reduction in synaptic plasticity, memory, and learning, as well as an increased risk of cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. And this is where fasting comes into play. Various fasting methods, such as intermittent fasting, have been found to upregulate BDNF and improve cognitive performance. Yet another positive effect fasting has on brain health is through the gut biome. Research has shown that IF changes the composition of the gut microbiota to favor brain health. While these benefits to the brain are awesome, you aren't going to reap the benefits from one 3-day fast. Rather, you should run 3-day fasts periodically. We should also mention that fasting has the ability to both prevent neurodegenerative diseases and the onset of dementia, as well as treat these impairments. As such, if you have a fully healthy brain, you may not see or feel benefits as you already are at your threshold for a healthy brain. However, just because you may not notice improvements, you can rest assured that fasting will keep your brain healthy. With that said, when it comes to acute effects, some studies showed there might be a slight decrease in cognition tasks such as reaction. This seems to occur after 24 hours, but may only be present during the transition period. At the same time, studies are inconclusive, so the exact causes are unknown, but the level of experience likely plays a role. While your brain is benefiting from fasting, we're now going to look at its effect on your endocrine system. Human growth hormone, or HGH, is a powerful peptide hormone that plays a crucial role in growth, development, and overall metabolic function. Due to its vast array of functions, it works through several mechanisms. During fasting, HGH promotes the breakdown of fat, lipolysis, and the release of fatty acids for energy. As this is a primary mechanism of fasting, it stands to reason that human growth hormone will increase during a 3-day fast. Actually, it doesn't even need 3 days. Studies have found that HGH can increase in just 2 days of fasting. Now, you could be thinking, but what about the potential adverse effects? Does it pose any harm to individuals? The truth is, it does happen, but perhaps not as much as you might expect. For example, one study looked at over 1,300 persons who followed what's known as the Buchinger-Wilhelmi fast. It's a fasting protocol that only allows 150 to 200 calories per day. During this period, there were fortunately no deaths or permanent effects. However, there were 2 hospitalizations: an elderly man with coronary artery disease who had a myocardial infarction, and a 67-year-old woman who experienced vomiting, diarrhea, and dizziness. Other than that, the most common disorders were sleep disturbances, seen by 14.94% of patients, fatigue by 13.7%, dry mouth by 8.84%, back pain by 7.43%, and hunger affecting 6.81%. In total, there were 22 mild symptoms and 8 different serious side effects. So, as you might imagine, fasting does carry some potential adverse effects, so it's not something to take lightly. However, with some preparation and planning, the risk of a serious event is quite small. Although we went through quite a few major physiological changes and adaptations in this video, it's still not all of them. Energy metabolism is one of the most important processes in the human body, and by fasting, you're creating an entirely new environment that forces your body to alter it completely. That's going to have a profound effect. It's probably safe to say that fasting will have an effect to some magnitude on just about every system. For example, we also have research to show that fasting has positive effects on the immune system as well as your cardiorespiratory system. As more and more research is done, It'll give researchers the ability to discover even more benefits. So now that you know what's going to happen to your body after not eating for 3 days, do you want to give it a shot? Now slow down there for a second. Going 72 hours without eating is not something to take lightly. If you've never fasted before, the longest you've probably ever gone without eating is 12 hours. Maybe 24 on accident one time. That would mean 72 hours is 3 to 6 times longer. Even though studies have shown that doing prolonged fasts is relatively safe, they do bring some health risks, as we saw. Therefore, think about it as lifting weights. Even though lifting is relatively safe, you don't just jump on your first day with a 5-hour session, including huge 1-rep max tests on all your barbell lifts. Rather, you ease into it. Therefore, before you do a 72-hour fast, begin with a shorter duration. The easiest option is intermittent fasting, or IF. IF is a method of fasting that alternates short blocks of time for feeding and long blocks of fasting. For example, you could start with an 8-hour block where you're allowed to consume food, followed by a 16-hour block of time for fasting. You could then gradually lengthen the block of fasting until you're left with just one meal a day, or OMAD. From there, you can move on to a full 24-hour fast, and so on. Another tip to prepare for longer fasts is to consume calories, but only in liquid form. This can help adapt to the sensation of not eating. In addition, you can practice by consuming a minimal amount of calories. For example, for your first 3-day fast, consume just 1,000 calories per day. On your next one, consume 750 calories, and then so on. Slowly adjust to fasting for longer periods of time. As you can see, there are multiple methods you can use. If you choose to try fasting, we wish you success and only ask that you perform a fast that you're safely able to do. And let us know how it went.